Hello and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. As always, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. You can also join my Patreon and that helps keep the videos coming. We're really trying to break through the algo wall, get a burst of growth so we can accomplish our goals here. We're also in the midst of a fundraiser for a very important cause, and I will talk about that at the end of the video. It's cult day here on Dark Hearts, and of course, I've got a very wacky story for you. It's a crazy story, but it's also very dark. As you know, some of the cults we talk about are so ridiculous that it's difficult not to laugh about them, and others are just as ridiculous, but even more dangerous. And then there are cults like the one we are talking about today that are more dangerous than they are ridiculous. All cults hurt people, all cults, but this one hurts vulnerable and innocent people. And I'll warn you, it's difficult for me to hide my personal feelings with groups like these because I grew up around the FLDS. I shared space with them my whole life. I still do. Around here, we just call them the Pligs. I have people in my life who I love dearly that were raised in polygamist homes in Colorado City, Arizona, that is about 40 minutes from where I live. These people are traumatized, they've been abused, and they are damaged in ways that make me very angry, but also leave me marveling in the fact that they're able to function as adults. The cult we are talking about today has a lot in common with the FLDS, which is the fundamentalist Latter-day Saint cult. And this one is just as evil. This is the story of the House of Yahweh. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. This is Yisroel Hawkins. He was actually named Buffalo Bill Hawkins when he was born, so right off the bat, we've got some real stable parents here. But Bill later changed his name, as these cult leaders so often do. Yisrael is a born con man. His siblings worked on the farm in Oklahoma where they were all raised, but Yisrael rode around town on a pony, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette, even as a child. He killed neighborhood cats and skinned them and took the meat to the poor side of town and sold it as rabbit. That is absolutely psychotic. He dropped out of school. He had no talents. He had no ambition. He got married and his wife left him within a year. He moved a Native American woman into the house with him and very quickly had 4 children with her. This man, Yisrael, failed at fatherhood. He failed at marriage. He failed at making a living. And then he found God. Isn't it funny how often that happens? Because for a lot of people, proximity to God instantly makes you good. And that's why so many con men and con women hide in religion, because they think the fact that they're associated with God in some way or another clears them of all suspicion, when for people like me, it makes them more suspicious. In 1974, Yisrael's brother, born J.G. Hawkins, came back to America from a 7-year stay in Israel. When J.G., who later becomes Yaqoob, comes back from the States, he claims that he has found in Israel what he claims to be proof of Yahweh's name. Now, before we go any further, we have to discuss this. Who and what is Yahweh? In the Jewish scriptures, the name of God is a mystery. The letters of God's name, his actual name, are written in Hebrew as YHWH, and people say those letters as Yahweh, but the truth is no one really knows how to pronounce the name of God as it is written in the Jewish scriptures. In most Bibles, YHWH is translated as Lord. In Genesis, the Hebrew word for God is Elohim, but that is a plural word, so it's not really correct. Elohim does not mean the God, it means gods. In Genesis 2, the 4-letter name for God, YHWH, first appears, and then God is referred to as that name from there on out. Jewish people prefer to avoid using the name of God. They often say Hashem, which means the name, or they say Baruch Hashem, which means blessed be the name, but they do not use God's actual name. It is considered too sacred. Now, this, of course, is a very brief explanation of this complex issue, but what it means is that essentially the name of God is not known. So when Israel's brother comes back from Israel claiming that he has found proof of God's actual name, that is a big deal. The two brothers started a little church in Odessa, Texas, which was affiliated with the Worldwide Church of God. They began preaching their own brand of religion that included referring to the Creator as Yahweh and the Messiah as Yeshua, which translates to rescue, save, or deliver in Hebrew. The little group read the Torah and strictly followed Jewish festivals and customs. This goes on for several years, and then in 1980, Buffalo Bill and JG changed their names to Yisrayl, which is pronounced like Israel with a Y, and Yaqoob, which is Jacob. They also decide that they're going to cut ties with the Worldwide Church of God. Yisrael changes the name of their church to House of Yahweh, and he starts preaching out of his house in Abilene, Texas. Now, if you've watched this channel for any amount of time, you know there is a very distinct order in which these cults are formed and a pattern that the men follow. Most of the time they're men. First, they declare that they are very special. They see things that other people do not see. Then they claim God's truth does not exist on the earth, and so they have been tasked with starting the one and only true church. Then the men claim that God appears to them and speaks only to them, and after that they begin stating that they are a prophet, handpicked by God. It's literally, you could write a script for all of these cults. These guys are all very similar. I would so love to do just a super deep dive on the psychology of these men because they have so much in common, down to the way they were raised and the kinds of parents that they had, spanning hundreds of years. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Joseph Smith or David Koresh, they have so much in common. Again, once in a while, it's a woman, and when it is, she's usually even crazier than the men. But usually it's a man. They all follow the same script, which is very funny to me, considering they're all claiming to be so very unique and so very special. Yisrael begins preaching that both he and his brother Yaqoob are spoken of in the Old and New Testaments, that they're actually mentioned in the Bible. Does this sound familiar to you? Jody Hildebrandt, remember I just posted that call from prison where she's telling the guy that she's talking to that she's mentioned in the scriptures. They're very, very special people, you guys. We're just little peons. They are very special. So who are Yisrael and Yaqoob in the Bible? They are the two witnesses. If you aren't up on your Bible speak, the two witnesses appear in the book of Revelation. They are two prophets that most people believe to be Enoch and Elijah. Some people believe they are Moses and Elijah. But at any rate, the two witnesses have the power to turn water into blood, and they have the power to close the heavens. They can also destroy their enemies, control the weather, and cause plagues. We love our magical thinking and our fairy tales in that Bible, don't we? Now, in Mormonism, as most of you know, I was born and raised Mormon. I am now an ex-Mormon. The two witnesses have a different story. They are believed to be either two members of the Quorum of the 12 or the First Presidency. The Quorum of the 12 is the Mormon version of the 12 apostles. They rotate and change as they die off, and other people are put in their place. And the First Presidency is the president of the church, which Mormons consider the prophet, and he has a first and second counselor. And yes, it's always a man. You must have a penis in order to speak with God. I think you speak through your penis to God. That must be it, right? I mean, surely people don't believe that men and women have different brains. Oh, wait, they actually do. But in Mormonism, the Mormons believe that the two witnesses are either their prophet, one of his counselors, or somebody in the Quorum of the 12. The two witnesses represent both of the ancient northern and southern kingdoms of Israel. They are also considered descendants of the two covenant sons from the tribes of Judah and Joseph. Some people in Mormonism actually believe that Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram Smith were the prototypes for the two witnesses, and they represent the future two witnesses who will be sent to Jerusalem and killed for their testimonies, as is prophesied in the Bible. So in today's story, it's important to recognize the lore about the two witnesses that many people believe will be brothers and the role that they play in the Bible story. Because Yisrael and Yaqoob believe they are the two witnesses, and that's what they're preaching to their people. So once Yisrael and Yaqoob have decided that they are the two witnesses, that their lives are prophesied in the Bible, and that makes them very, very special, they begin to believe that they have been handpicked by God to usher in the second coming of Christ that they call Yeshua. And I just find this fascinating because There is something so similar in all of these men's upbringing. When you compare them side by side, we have the Lafferty brothers, who thought they were the two prophets, the arm of God and the sword of God. We have the Hser brothers. Remember them from the Children of Thunder? And then, we've got these two yokels. It's because there are examples of brother prophets in the Bible. You've got Ishmael and Isaac. And then I think, aren't there two brothers in Abraham as well? So this is not a new concept. Men becoming delusional and choosing to believe that they are very special because they're brothers. It's not a new concept. You guys know one of the things that fascinates me so much about cults, I'm sure because I was raised Mormon and I'm trying to work through my trauma, is this desire to feel like you're just so goddamn special. I think this is going to sound meaner than I want it to, but don't you realize that you have a talent? We all have talents. Every single person on this earth has things that we do better than other people do. Every single one of us. I guess for some people, those talents just aren't enough. They have to pretend to be handpicked by God because that is the only thing that makes them feel special enough. And it's kind of sad. So as is always the case, the men believe and preach that the House of Yahweh is the one and only true faith, that it is the oldest of all the faiths, and that this very specific religion is the one and only ordained of Yahweh. Their church is the one and only that has the truth. This is, of course, very, very familiar to me, as the Mormon church believes it is the only true church. The leaders of the House of Yahweh begin preaching that the Great Tribulation is very near, and the people must prepare. What is the Great Tribulation? It's basically the apocalypse, kind of just a different way of wording it. It's a period of time when there will be plagues and wars and afflictions and calamities, and then the people will suffer greatly. Then Jesus will come back to the earth, only I'm not really sure how that fits into the House of Yahweh, who don't believe Jesus is the Messiah. Jews, of course, do not believe in the idea of a Messiah that returns to earth. That's confusing to me. They're basically Jewish, but they use the Bible and they believe in a Messiah. It's strange. Now, we could continue talking about the beliefs, but frankly, I find the minutia a little boring. To me, this is like sitting and talking about which orc is the strongest and which wizard has the most powers in Lord of the Rings. As an agnostic person, I do not see the scriptures as anything but a group of writings created by ghosts. And although I think there are some great lessons to be learned in the books that are scriptures to most people, I do not believe in magic or magical beings or chosen people or sorcery or special powers. I believe that we are all brutally alone and painfully equal at our core. And if there is a point to this life, it's that. It's learning that we are all equal and treating each other as such. People existing with special powers, in my mind, would break the game and make this all pointless, if there is a point to this. So you'll have to forgive me. Getting really tied up in scripture is something to me that is just like arguing over a book. So let's move on and talk about how this cult gets more and more dangerous as time progresses. The group begins to grow a little bit. I had a very difficult time finding reliable statistics stating how many members belonged to the church at its heyday, which was in the late 1990s. I know at one point it was thousands of people, multiple thousands of people. But Buffalo Bill Yisrayl gets very into predicting the future. This becomes kind of his thing and kind of a tenet of the House of Yahweh, these predictions. Yisrael is preaching that the end of the world is coming and that things are going to get very strange and very disturbing, and that Texas is going to be the epicenter for some world events. Oh, Lordy, that is a concept. And then the strangest thing of all happens. Some of Yisrael's predictions start to come true. I remember this event as if it was yesterday. I was 23 years old and I was glued to the television. I didn't understand really at all what was happening, but I knew that I was very, very interested in it. David Kesh, a self-proclaimed prophet, had holed up in a large structure in Waco, Texas, and every night this kind of unusual woman, Janet Reno, was on television talking about how the government was trying to get him to come out. Now, being 23 for me, the way that I was raised and where I was raised, I was like mentally maybe a 16-year-old. I was very, very sheltered from world events and the world in general. So I had a difficult time understanding what all of this was about in Waco. But when Kesh set fire to that place and all of those people died, it did something in my brain. I will never forget those images. I just remember thinking, how could people be so stupid? Why would anyone follow this man who is obviously so evil, having sex with all the women and taking child brides? Yeah, that's the thing about cults, my friends. Even when you're in one, you think you're not, and you think you're able to talk about others who are. The mind is a wild place, my friends. But to Yisrayl and Yaqoob, the Waco standoff is not what it actually is, another group of wackos buried deep in delusion. It's a sign. This is a sign straight from God that the Great Tribulation has begun. The House of Yahweh followers are so excited and feel so validated. They are following the true prophet. They just know it. He has predicted this, and now it has come true. If that weren't enough, just a few years later, the Heaven's Gate event occurs. I'm sure many of you remember this. That event is seared into my brain, every little detail. This is the group of people who castrated themselves and then took poison, laid down on their beds, covered themselves with purple triangles. Remember those purple triangles? And waited for a spaceship to come and pick them up. Spoiler alert, the spaceship did not, in fact, come and pick them up, and they're all just buried somewhere. See, at least with us, with our little community, we're going to be alive when our spaceship comes. If you're new here, we have a running joke about wanting a spaceship to pick us all up and take us for a ride for like a year to give us a break from all the craziness here on Earth. But we do want to live, we want to live on our spaceship ride. But when the news broke of the 39 dead Heaven's Gate cult members, the members of the House of Yahweh took this as an additional sign. Now Yisrael had predicted 2 occurrences in their minds. He didn't predict anything. People just see what they want to see in predictions. Apparently, Buffalo Bill God, whatever he's calling himself, he had been a cop in his younger years. And he was also like a rockabilly singer. He had tried to get famous on the singing circuit and had a band and traveled around. Just like David Koresh, just like Charles Manson. It's just, these guys have so much in common. It's wild. By 1994, at least 300 of the House of Yahweh followers had legally changed their last names to Hawkins, so they would be considered like actual family members of Yisrael. They called themselves his priestly family. And they also had all pierced their ears. This became like a big sign of loyalty to the family for some reason. I mean, most women have pierced ears. I guess the guys pierced their ears too. I don't know. Yisrael starts using the internet to do his proselytizing. Then he started going on public television. Remember when they used to have like cable access TV shows and you could book time to, for like a half an hour to have your little show? He actually bought airtime in 90 cities. So this show that he had, this little half-hour show, was getting piped out to 90 cities. Then Yisrael gets into selling mobile homes to his cult members so they could have a place to live on the compound in Texas. And it was another one of his scams. What he would do is finance these trailer park homes to his followers. He keeps all the interest on the loans and he takes the payments. And then if the cult members ever decide to leave the group, the contract that they sign states they don't get any of their money back. So Yisrael has now taken all the payments and he gets to keep the trailer home that he turns around and resells to another follower. This apparently is how he was financing the cult, and he was taking tithes from his followers as well. Tithing, what a racket. By the late 1990s, the cult was really starting to pick up steam, and that's because Yisrael had been preaching that we were all going to start seeing signs of the apocalypse, and then these signs would come by way of false religions meeting their end. And he took that to mean the Branch Davidians, the Heaven's Gate, they had all met their end, and so that meant, his prophecies had come true. So this small group of people, this cult that he had started, they were really starting to believe that this guy was the real deal. I mean, some of them had believed it for a while, and more people were coming in all the time. Yisrael's wife, a woman named Kesh, left him in 1993 when she found out, you already know what I'm going to say, that Yisrael was sleeping with the other female members of the cult. God is very insistent that he wants these very special men to have sex with lots and lots of women. They all have to have sex with lots of women, lots of very young women. When Kesh finds out that her husband is sleeping around and cheating on her, he throws her out of the compound. He actually had her and one of his sons, picked up by the arms and physically thrown out of the compound by armed guards. With her gone, Yisrael was free to really delve into his disgusting side. I'm convinced that for a lot of these guys, God is tied into just their sexual perversions. If they make it about God, then they can get away with their perverted needs and wants. Yisrael begins making everyone remove their shoes to enter his space, the worship space. The women are now wearing long sleeve dresses and veils to hide their faces. Everyone has to disinfect their hands before being allowed in for the worship services. Yisrael, this magical prophet, is apparently afraid of germs. God's going to protect him from the apocalypse, but not from germs. Now, the dark part of this is that the children are treated terribly, no better than slaves. The men are forced to give up everything they own and turn all of their property over to Yisrael. Still, they stay. In the spring of 1997, writers from Newsweek and Hard Copy, remember Hard Copy, along with other media outlets, started to pick up on the story of this cult. There was word spreading in Texas that there was this self-proclaimed prophet who was correctly predicting the ends of false religious sects, and his predictions, were coming true. So Newsweek sends a reporter to Texas, and then Hard Copy sends a TV crew, and they capture the pure madness and mayhem that has become the House of Yahweh. The Newsweek reporter writes that they arrived in Abilene to a guarded 40-acre compound outside of town. The compound was packed with cars from all over the country. People had left their lives from LA to New York. They'd packed up their car and traveled to Abilene to become part of this cult. The reporter writes that leader Yisroel Hawkins stands at a podium flanked by armed guards and speaks as his followers cram into this little small space to cling to his every word. Yisrael shouts that the world is ending and that he is one of the two witnesses prophesied in the book of Revelation. He claims that he and his brother will have the power to nearly destroy the world in preparation for the return of the Messiah. Then this Newsweek reporter finds out that the Abilene Police Department have reports that the cult has a literal arsenal of weapons and that most of them are not legal. But the police are afraid to go inside, even though they want to investigate these reports. They're afraid to start another Waco, Texas. They don't want another standoff on their hands. The reporter also finds out that the cops have reports that state some of the members of the House of Yahweh are former members of what's called the Posse Comitatus. We're going to do an episode on the Posse Comitatus. It was one of the most violent militias in American history. But anyway, some of those former posse members are now with the House of Yahweh, and they use very dirty guerrilla-style tactics that make the police nervous about entering the compound. The Newsweek reporter includes in the article that this seems to be the golden age of the doomsday industry. And looking back, there's a lot of truth to that. There were a lot of really crazy groups in the late 90s, and then it all kind of died out for a while. And now I feel like we are seeing a resurgence of the apocalyptic cults and doomsday thinkers, as we've seen with Lori Vallow. Remember the Arizona people, the lady that kidnapped her son and took him to Alaska. Everything old is new again. I get so bummed out when I'm scrolling on TikTok and stuff comes up where people claim they're seeing people with black eyes and demons. And it's just oh my God, grow up. Read a history book and you will realize what you are doing has already been done 10 times over. At this point in time, late 90s, Yisrael has become not a prophet, but a dictator. Reporters that had visited the cult return with stories of people absolutely terrified to speak out against this man. There are stories of a woman who was tossed out of the cult and separated from her children for just mildly disagreeing with something Yisrael said. His sermons have become rage-filled tirades about the end of times and, of course, the wickedness of anyone who isn't in the cult. Cults are all about othering people. Those people over there, those people over there. We're seeing that now with Christian nationalism. We're right and everyone over there, those people over there, everyone else is bad. You can't sow division without othering people. You can't feel superior without othering people. Yisrael starts making more predictions, except this time, surprisingly, they don't come true. In 1999, Yisrael states that 4 4/5 of the world's population is going to be wiped out between then and mid-2002. Yisrayl even tells a reporter, "Mark it on your calendar. 4/5 of the world population will be gone by 2002. The reporter asks, "What if what you're saying doesn't happen?" And Yisrayl replies, "There is no possibility that it could not take place, just as I have told you." Oh, one of my favorite quotes of all time. Idiots are always so damn sure they're right. Intelligent people question everything. Idiots are sure that they're right. You know, I'm never really disturbed that some delusional moron thinks he can predict the end of the world. What I'm more disturbed about is that there are people who believe in the delusional moron and that they continue to believe in them even when they make bold-faced predictions that do not come true. It's something I can't wrap my head around. Well, when 4/5 of the world population is not wiped out, Yisrael makes another prediction, this time on September 12th, 2006. He claims that he has been told by God that all the nations of the world were facing destruction, but that the Abilene, Texas cult would be saved. Now, apparently, the House of Yahweh has a sect in Kenya, and this particular prediction really scared these people. Some of them were even arrested for inciting fear in the local population by preaching the end of the world was coming September 2006. They were very concerned because they couldn't get to Abilene, Texas. Once again, the prediction did not come true. A year later, in June of 2007, Yisrael makes an amendment to his prediction, saying, "Oh wait, it was just a nuclear war being conceived in September of 2006. It was just the planning of that." The real nuclear war was coming, just like a baby would, 9 months after conception. Yisrael goes on the House of Yahweh website and writes that a nuclear baby will be born on June 12th, 2007. He then states that by October 13th of that same year, 80% of the human race will be dead from this nuclear war that's going to take place. Again, it doesn't happen. So when is the next war? Oh, it's June 12th, 2008. He just got the year wrong. The date came and went, and we were all still here, so I love it here. Yisrael then kind of gets off the prediction train for a while, 8 years to be exact, but then he's back. He predicts that nuclear destruction would end the world before Christmas of 2016. The group gathers on Christmas Eve to await their impending doom, but then, wah, they just have to go home in the morning. Can you imagine that? Like Christmas morning, you're like, well, we're all still here. Sorry, I didn't get you anything for Christmas. I cannot. So now we're at the point of the cult story where I always ask the same question. Who cares? Why should any of this matter to us? If a group of kooks want to get together and believe in this crazy old loon, why does it matter? And this is where it gets very dark. We always have to remember that cult members don't stop procreating. They have kids, and they drag these kids into this nonsense with them, kids that have no free agency and no method by which to escape this madness. Really serious accusations against the cult all started with reports of people living near the compound who were concerned with some of the things that they were seeing. Out in the fields and around the compound were large lights similar to those on a baseball field. Well past sunset, people in the area could see kids, younger than teenagers, working in the fields. So these people started to pay more attention, and what they saw was horrifying. Those kids were brought out into the field at sunup. They worked all day long, and they were still working long after the sun went down. This is child abuse, plain and simple. We have labor laws in this country for a reason, and we have child labor laws in place to stop monsters like this old geezer from exploiting children. So an investigation was opened into the treatment of these kids, and then there began to be reports made by former members of the cult about Yisrael doing what else? Having sex with girls. We don't say underage women. We don't say young women. We say girls. We say children. because that's what they are. Like we see in all these cults, God speaks to these men and tells them how special they are. But the most important thing is that they've got to have sex with a lot of women, and they've got to have sex with girls. These guys are all the same monster. They gather their group, they take their time, they take their money, they take their property, and then they take their children. An investigation regarding bigamy is opened, and Yisrayl is investigated for that. Then it comes to light that he has this disgusting perv working for him. This guy's church name is Yisroel Hawkins, because of course it is. A former House of Yahweh member goes to the authorities and tells them that this man is sexually assaulting the children of the group, including his own stepdaughter. Stories begin to come out about starvation and physical beatings, and it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Well, I was kicked out of the House of Yahweh for stealing food. And
what do you mean stealing food?
Well, I was bringing food to other people that were in the work along with me, who told me they were hungry, and I was running a garden, and a lot of the garden food we were dumping out to chickens and the dogs. And so I decided to take some of the food and help my fellow workers out with, and then that was the excuse they used to put me out. I had them call the sheriff of Callahan County, and he drove me away.
Yedidiah is arrested in October of 2007 for sexual assault of his 14-year-old stepdaughter, who reveals that she has been being abused since she was 8 years old. This piece of crap gets 30 years in prison. He's still there, which is exactly where he should be. I found him on a Texas inmate search. He's locked up at Dalhart until 2037. He was eligible for parole in 2022, but luckily he was denied. Then finally, the district attorney feels that its office has enough information on Yisrayl himself to arrest him. On February 12th, 2008, the prophet of God, one of the two witnesses, is hauled in like the common man that he is, charged with bigamy and breaking child labor laws. His bail was set at $10 million, but was later reduced to $100,000. Of course, he was able to post that. A year and a half later, the bigamy charges were dropped because they couldn't get any of the women that Yisrayl was supposedly married to testify. But Yisrayl ends up pleading no contest to the child labor law violations. He is given a fine and probation. I thought this was Big Bad Texas, where you're so tough on crime. Oh, wait. You're only tough on crime for minorities. I forgot. This is a white man hurting women and children especially. So we don't actually care. Children only matter in Texas before they're born. I forgot. If you think I'm wrong, go ahead and spend some time like I have looking back through the sentences that people get that hurt kids in Texas. It's getting better in the last 5 or 6 years. Look before then. This guy is no more than a con artist who stands at the helm of a trashy, scruffy group of comically deluded followers. He stands like the Wizard of Oz, hunched over the pulpit, looking very troll-like, screaming about fire and brimstone. He claims that all of his prophecies have come true, but that people are just too blind to see them. Like so many others of his ilk, he rails against the media, claiming that everything they print about him is a lie, and that the persecution he has endured is simply more proof that he is a prophet of God. Boy, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? He says that the men who revile and persecute him only prove how powerful he is. Former members, however, were telling different stories. Michael Shero had to file for bankruptcy and left the cult to start his life over. Members begin telling stories of regret at raising their families inside the cult, regret that they didn't leave when they realized Yisrayl was a fraud, regret that they'd allowed themselves to be taken advantage of. Female members tell stories of being separated from their children, from their daughters who are now forced to have sex with this creepy old goblin. Daughters who would never lead a normal life. This is why cults are so damaging, my friends. This is why we must talk about them. There are people who simply do not have the skill set to pull themselves out of these situations. There are people who are born into it, and they are completely incapable of understanding how bad their situation is. We talk about these things because it matters, and because we do have a responsibility to help those who cannot help themselves. Yisrayl continued to rant and rave and steal and con, and then suddenly It was all over, just like that.
The leader of a controversial church in the Abilene area has died, and his death was confirmed by the Clyde Funeral Home. KTexas reporter Farrah Walton has more on who he was and the church he leaves behind.
That's right, Will. In the story we first brought to you Sunday on KTexas News at 5, the controversial leader Yisroel Hawkins died Friday. He was 87 years old. We are here outside of the main compound for the House of Yahweh, which is just about a mile down this road. Who was Yisroel Hawkins and what is the House of Yahweh? Let's take a look. The House of Yahweh was founded in 1980 as a religious group based in Eula, Texas. Their leader was Yisroel Hawkins. He was born in Oklahoma with the name Buffalo Bill before legally changing his name in 1980 and leading hundreds of his followers to change their last names to Hawkins as well. The religious group praises their creator Yahweh, and their main focus is on Old Testament law. They make sure to follow all 613 of Yahweh's laws. And they claim their book, the Book of Yahweh, the newly restored original Bible, to be the only accurate translation of the Bible. The church has been known to authorities and former members as a cult. There have been reports of wrongful death, forced child marriage, child labor, and sexual assault. Yisroel Hawkins began preaching polygamy in the early 1990s. Former members of Yahweh say that Yisroel had up to 24 wives and that he claimed women had to accept it or leave and forfeit heaven. He believed that he was a prophet chosen to deliver the world from destruction in the 11th chapter of the book of Revelation, that Israel's apocalyptic prophecies were rooted in, and that the only survivors of the apocalypse would be those a part of his sect. In 2008, Hawkins was arrested and charged with bigamy and child labor violations. The bigamy charges were dropped, but he pled no contest to child labor violations.
With their prophet and founder dead, with 0 of his predictions coming true, 0, you'd think that the group members would wake up and fall away, but sadly, that is not the case. Here is the group Facebook page. It posts multiple times a day. Thankfully, the posts only get about 10 likes and one guy that comments on all of them. Most of the group members appear to be outside of America at this point. The Kenyan sect is still going strong. The Facebook page hosts live classes several times a week. As long as I've been interested in cults, I will never understand. Faith, I get. Faith is a concept with purpose. Faith helps fearful people have less fear. I understand that. What I will never understand is how intelligent people cannot see that they are being led by the nose by a con artist. I will never understand, especially with the internet and all of the information we have now, how some people do not or will not simply research what a cult is and how easy they are to spot. I will never understand how people willingly give away their freedom, their happiness, their life in order to belong to a group that is pretending to know what no one can possibly know. It makes me sad and it makes me angry. And it also makes me feel a responsibility to spread information about why these cults are dangerous. And I plan to continue doing just that. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to support me. I really need all the help breaking through the algorithm that I can get. You can also join my Patreon. For a few bucks a month, you keep the videos coming, and we are in the midst of a fundraiser. This is the thumbnail that is on my playlist. You can watch this video and it will explain everything that we are doing, raising money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that has never been tested. You don't have to donate 20 bucks, you can donate $1. I would love it if everyone donated $1. I want you to know how much I appreciate you and how much I enjoy talking with all of you online. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other, and I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.